A leader's primary job is to create value with and through others. And I actually believe that the power of capable leadership is demonstrated best through appropriate and consistent nudging. When I hear leaders talk about the type of leader that they want to be, they'll say things like, I want to be a servant leader, confident, strong, energizing. I want to foster trust, et cetera. And there's a pretty big list. But I'm always curious, like, what does that really mean beyond what to me often sounds like sort of business virtue signaling, if you will? And again, a leader's job is to continually create more and more value over time for the organization that they work for. And there's three things that the leader really needs to have their head around. One, the business model. Two, the value of the products and services that you have. And three, culture. So on the business model, do you really understand how the organization makes money? Do you understand the pricing, the expenses, everything that goes into it? Like really understand it and how it applies to your team? And then two, when you think about the value of the products and services, do you really understand the value? Do you know what the marketplace is saying about the value of your products and services? And can you sink your teeth into continually improving that value over time? In the third category, culture, what are the sort of behaviors and attitudes that cause the best results to happen for the organization? Do you know that inside and out? And we want to really get our heads around those things. We're going to be leading and kind of driving the entire team in that direction. Now, it's really common for, I think, all leaders to have team members that are making decisions and taking actions that are not fully in alignment with those three things. And it's happening really quite often. I get to work with a lot of different organizations. And one of the common things that I hear from leaders is, how come people aren't doing what they should be doing? Don't they understand what's going on? And that kind of becomes, really a steady state. And I can hear that complaint from a leader for a really long time. It can go on for years. So it's something about how they're showing up as a leader and how they're developing their team members. Whenever we're doing the really hard, smart, and I think should mostly be fun work of creating more and more value for our customers, it's important for leaders, all of us, to be consistently and continually sort of nudging all the folks on our teams in the direction for 100% alignment to the business model, to the value of our products and or services, and the value creation culture that we want to have. So we've all been around activities where that's not going on. And I would say the reason that these decisions and actions aren't being taken in a way that's fully in alignment with those three things is because they don't understand it either. So our job as a leader is to constantly get them moving in that direction and making decisions around that stuff. And the goal here is to get everybody on the same track where they really get it and they're actually picking up speed on their own. And what I mean by that is they're creating more and more value on their own. And you actually know that you're starting to get this right because you've done a lot of nudging. And for example, I'll come in and work with a new team. It's like, oh my gosh, they're all incredibly capable. And yet the decisions they're making are just a little bit to sometimes significantly off in all three of those categories. And then after an appropriate amount of nudging, and if you're intentional about it, it can be in as little as 2 or 3 months where, oh my gosh, I have to do 50% less nudging because they're starting to get it. And within 6 months to a year, I hardly have to do anything. And it's wonderful to see that everybody's making the right decisions, taking the right actions. And they're always 1 or 2 steps ahead of where I thought they probably should or could be at that point in time. So that's how I know I'm getting it right. And you've actually really won when they're starting to nudge others to go in that direction. So now we're sort of cascading that out through the organization. So again, that's where I think the real power of leadership is demonstrated. It's this consistent, appropriate nudging around the business model, the value of the products and services that you have, and the value creation culture that you want. And on the culture side, I always look through the holistic value creation lens. So we're talking about material value creation, we're talking about emotional energy value creation, and spiritual value creation. And spiritual for me is always about connectedness. So as a leader, you're doing all of the nudging foundationally, how are you keeping value creation in balance so everything moves faster and you have a huge competitive advantage out there? It's important to have some kind of intentional operating system or agreed upon way of creating value inside the organization. So this foundation where you're getting full alignment around whatever the goals are, how you consistently increase the value of the organization. I think that's really important. But once that foundation is in place, people will be running around doing a lot of things. And sometimes they don't end up getting the value. Well, why? And for me, it fully comes back to this consistent nudging around those three things. So in doing that, I actually believe this is where the real power of leadership is demonstrated. And we can get away from things that sound good, like I want to be a servant leader or any other type of leader out there. Looks good, feels good, sounds good. How do you really break it down and in a sort of practical way become a leader that increases the value of their organization appropriately for the team that they're leading over time, and that just continually grows? That's the real power of leadership. I want to talk about CEO development through the holistic value creation filter. And what I mean by holistic value creation is really three different buckets. There's material value creation, which is what we're all mostly familiar with, money, cash flow, things, et cetera. But there's also emotional energy value creation and spiritual value creation. On the spiritual side, it's about connectedness. And as we're developing organizations to create more and more value over time, the emotional energy value that we create really is the X factor for leaders. They create these energizing environments for all the team members. And when they do that, the value that they create is so much more. It really unleashes this intrinsic motivation when they do it well. So creating material value is supercharged when you get the emotional energy right. And then the spiritual value creation or connectedness, there's so much that CEOs can do to put programs in place that will allow team members to better understand themselves, so personal connection, and then be more connected with other team members, as well as all of the communities that we engage with out there. There's so much that we can do. And from personal experience, focusing on all three, material, emotional, and spiritual, I've been able to get significantly higher multiples in my exits from different companies over time. And I'm currently on my 8th company I've started from scratch and consulting with several companies today, and have consulted with hundreds of companies over the last 8 or 9 years. Now, the number one job of a CEO, in my opinion, is to continually and responsibly increase the value of their organization. And by proxy, their senior leadership team's job is to do the same thing. And this is whether you're a 5-person company, a 500-person company, 5,000 or more team members. That's the primary job. And there's so many things that are good for all stakeholders when that's actually happening. Now, most CEOs have a coach. They read books. They have groups that they belong to, all sort of with the intent of increasing their capabilities or improving their capabilities around value creation. I'm not sure how many CEOs intentionally do that, but I believe that's what we're all doing when we're trying to create more value through our companies. Now, one way to do that is to join a CEO mastermind or peer advisory group. And I'm a pretty big fan of those, for a few reasons. One, virtually all of them bring the ability to have, sort of better connection with other like-minded individuals. It builds a community that understands what you're going through. You can bounce ideas off of them. The challenge with most of these organizations, and there's some large ones, Vistage, YPO, EO, McKay, Renaissance, there's a lot of them out there. They're really good for the first, 6 months to maybe 2 years on learning new stuff that's really helping you with your business. But they lose, in my view, and I've been part of different groups like this for over 40 years with overlap, they lose their evergreen sort of value that they offer. And I think that happens for a couple of reasons. One, the groups get too big, so you have very little time to talk about your business. And another point is that the members know so little about each other's business that it's hard to get all of their brain power to help each other create more value over time. And they often make process more important than value creation. So one of the things that I'm familiar with, because I've been part of a lot of different groups over the years, is there could be some form of an issue processing process where you state the issue, everybody asks clarifying questions, you answer them, and then they run around the room and give you some feedback, and then off you go. Now, the challenge with that is that the issue most CEOs bring up is often a symptom of something else going on. And if the group doesn't understand enough about each other's business, they can't go to the root cause. They just address the thing that was brought up. So that makes it really difficult. Now, one of the things that I've done is, hey, how do I create a better environment that really reinforces holistic value creation within organizations and those capabilities within each CEO to responsibly continually increase the value of their business? I actually call it execute masterminds. And in these groups, just learning from all the other group experiences that I've had, and there's always good stuff. But if you're really trying to grow the value of your business very intentionally, and that's why you want to be part of a group, I always knew there was a better way. And so, the format that I found works really well, and this could be done really in any group, is limited to 8 members. It's a 1 full day a month experience. And every 2 months, every member gets a deep dive into their organization. And for every member, each of these groups, all of them can see what each member's most important number is, which is reflective of the value of their business. And we're ensuring that they're on track at any and every point in time. So we know where we started, where we're going, and where we're at. And we're ensuring that each member is doing the right work to continually increase the value of their business and actually stay on track. So, for example, if profit is the goal, you can measure just straight net profit. It could be cash flow, or EBITDA is often a multiple of that that's used for selling a business. So is that growing over time at the rate you want it to? Do you want to grow 15%, 20%, 50%, whatever that is? And all the other group members are that really help with that. And there's a number of things that we'll look at. For sure, we know what for each member winning looks like for the current year, for the next year. And we capture actions around what's the work that each CEO should be doing right now to ensure that we stay on track with where they want to go. And we'll focus on a few things. The business model, for example, how does pricing work? How do the expenses work? The structure, everything in there. What kind of profit is left over, and what's the potential for future profits, and what can be done to optimize that business model so we create more and more value over time for all stakeholders, for customers, shareholders, employees, et cetera. We'll look at strategy, and, strategy, the simplest way I can think about it is approaches to increasing the value of a business. That's really all it is. And so what are the approaches to increasing the value of the business? And we hold each other accountable to making sure that we're staying on track with those things. And it could be changing the structure of the organization. It could be putting in place a leadership development program. It could be putting in place focus groups, changing pricing. And there's a lot that we can do there. Revamping the marketing process so we get a lot more qualified leads. I mean, there's just so much. And every organization is unique and different. So what applies to one will not apply to all, for sure. So in this format, when you do a deep dive on each other's business, no less than every 2 months, we're doing what they actually need to be focusing on to increase the value of their business. We also look at the value of the products and services. What are the customers actually saying about it? How is the market responding to it? Do all the team members in your organization understand what the customers are saying about the value? Can they stump speech around it? Do they know how in their role they can continually increase or improve the value of the products and services? And then we'll also look at culture, which is super important. In culture, if you really want to simplify it, it's just simply what are the attitudes and behaviors that cause the best value to be created or the most value to be created going forward. So we want to know that every CEO in these groups is essentially doing their best work to increase the value of their business. And there's a degree of accountability here because we're grabbing these milestone action items to make sure things are done to move everything in the right direction. And one of the things that I really love about this process for cultivating every CEO's ability to create more value is sort of sharing CEO wisdom. And what I mean by that is when you get in a room of 6 to 8 other CEOs for a full day every month, and you're sharing real practical CEO wisdom about what works and doesn't work in the real world with real employees, real investors, real customers out there, you know what actually works. It's from the front lines. It's not academic from a book. It's not from an expert that's coming in talking about something that hasn't done it in decades. It's real practical CEO wisdom. And what's wonderful about it over time is it just keeps stacking on itself. And so when you have everybody in this type of formatted forum group for CEOs, increasing the value of their business responsibly and on the front lines, really working on it, applying all the stuff that we're talking about from the meetings between the meetings, those learnings when they come back are so powerful and they do apply to everybody in the group. And I always think of these groups metaphorically as though I've invested over half my retirement money in this conglomerate that makes up the group. And I want to make sure that I get a really good return in my retirement so I can sustain the lifestyle that I would like to have. And all of the other members take that on as well. And so that's a really interesting leaning in perspective that happens when you have that mindset coming into the room. It's not just showing up like a lot of groups that I've been part of, waiting to get something that you can apply and then you take and run with it. You have your turn, but when it's not your turn, you're intensely focused on each other's business to help them increase the value of it. And again, responsibly in there. So that's an interesting mindset. Also, in terms of cultivating, capabilities to create value faster, I always cultivate significantly faster when I'm leaning in to help others. And members of these groups in this format, they understand that when they lean in hard to help other members increase the value of their business, whether they're significantly bigger or significantly smaller, it develops their capabilities to create value faster. And I love it when the large company CEOs, let's say something $300 million or more, is working with the CEO of a $2 million business. The larger company CEOs are launching products and services often regularly, and so it helps them with their skills to be able to do it. The smaller companies get to observe what's happening in larger companies. That's kind of where they're going. But those CEOs always come from some background where they can add a lot of value. And so I love groups that are stratified from, $1 million to $2 million companies all the way up to hundreds of millions of dollars. Because there's so much benefit having all of them together. So that's my take on, every CEO's primary and number one job really is to responsibly increase the value of their business. And to do that, they have to cultivate their capabilities to do it. When I think about performance reviews and all the businesses that I've started and clients that I've worked with over the years, traditional performance reviews is not an experience that most team members or most leaders really look forward to. I mean, there's some really good ones that happen, but I think it's actually less than probably 10% of the time where the leader and the team member being reviewed walks away saying, wow, this was just an incredible experience. With performance snapshots, they walk away virtually 95+% of the time saying this was really, really good. In fact, I've yet to hear a bad experience going through that. But before I get into it, what are the issues with traditional performance reviews? And the way I think about it, it's hard when everything's moving really fast and we've got new team members coming on board and there's lots of pressures doing the job for leaders to be ultra clear about what's expected from every single team member. And then what ends up happening is team members are doing what they think is best for the organization and their role. And they get to the performance review and they didn't get all the information. And the boss will often deliver that information at the time of the review that was missing before. And so there was an alignment of expectations. The team members are often frustrated. The boss is frustrated. And then every 6 months or whatever that interval is, they sort of rinse and repeat. It's not really a great cycle. The performance snapshot, on the other hand, everybody knows what's expected 100% of the time, and they know where they stand 100% of the time. So we're just taking a snapshot in time of exactly where they're at, so we don't have any of those issues. And there's some foundational things required to have in place so you can set performance snapshots up for that particular experience. And typically there are 3 goals with few exceptions for every team member going through a performance snapshot. There's their team's most important number goal, which is a shared goal. And the most important number, the way to think about it, if you have a team and that team is designed to create value, as all teams should be, what would be the one number that's most reflective of the value the team's creating and will drive the majority of the right behaviors? So that's the number. And everybody's sitting in a role doing their best work together to continually improve on that number to create more value as a team over time. So the first goal is shared. It's a most important number goal, and that can change depending on what the function is. If it's marketing, it could be qualified leads generated. If it's sales, it could be profitable sales closed. If it's operations, it could be gross profit. I mean, there's a number of things that it could be. So that's the first goal. And then the second goal would be the outcome-based responsibilities that each team member has for their role. So this goal would be, how well are you achieving your outcome-based responsibilities? Typically, there's not more than 2 or 3 that go into this composite goal, rarely 4, but 2 or 3. And they're measurable. And on these outcome-based responsibilities for a role, it's good to define how they're going to be measured when you onboard the team member. And the conversation goes something like this: "Hey, welcome to the company. Your role is to accomplish these things, and here's how we're going to measure them. And what do you think? Is this possible to hit these goals?" Let's say there's just one for sake of conversation here, and you draw a line. We're going to start here. We're going there. Do you think you can hit that or beat it over time? And the team members almost always will say, "Well, yeah, of course I can do that." And then be really clear about what would happen if this wasn't going to work out. And not all team members get hired into a role that's a perfect fit for them, capability or culture. But let's say you've got one line for what the plan is and how they're going to be measured. And you've got another line that you could say, if at any point in time we fall below that, this won't work. But man, we're so happy and appreciative that you tried. But we'll find something else for you, either in the organization or help you find another job. What's wonderful about that conversation is that if it happens where they don't actually perform and they fall below that line, nobody's surprised, and it's not personal. Hey, we gave it a shot, et cetera. And I will say that when you really define the outcome in a very clear, measurable way, of the 10 people that an organization might have to let go because of poor performance, I think you save 7 or 8 of them, in my experience, because they were very clear on what the expectations were. So that clarity causes a lot more team members to be successful, at least into the solid middle performing category, than you otherwise would have. So those are our first 2 goals. You got the most important number. You have the outcome-based responsibilities goal. And then the third goal is culture. And on the culture side, are they living the culture? Do they fit the culture? Are they reinforcing the culture? And so it's kind of important to have an intentional culture defined. A real simple way to think about it, what are the attitudes and behaviors that cause the most value to be created within your organization? You could just start with that. You could have a more robust set of alignment tools, like a mission and a vision and a purpose, a quality policy, a set of leadership traits, behaviors, values. You can do that. I encourage you not to make it too complicated. Once you have your set of cultural alignment tools, From there, just define the criteria of how each team member would be scored around those alignment tools during a performance snapshot. So, one is you're living the alignment tool and you have examples of where you're applying each one of them to create value, mission behaviors, for example. You're encouraging others to live the alignment tools within your organization. And based on those things, and you can make the criteria whatever you want, but keep it straightforward, really simple, intuitive, easy to understand, then you come up with a rating for the culture goal. So for each of the team members, they need to be clear on the value their team's designed to create. They need to be really clear on the value that their role was designed to create and stay on track for that in a measurable way and be part of the culture, reinforce the culture, improve the culture. And that sets up the 3 goals in there. So foundationally, we all have to do the work to be really clear on what we expect. And it's always interesting to me, and it's funny and it's not, where, hey, the team member was let go because they didn't do what I didn't tell them to do, that I wasn't aware of until we did the performance review. Then I was aware. It's like, wait a minute, we have to stop all of that. And there's not one more responsible than the other. If the leader wasn't clear and the team member was happy just moving along, taking a paycheck, not knowing what value they were creating and aware of it, both parties should be driving to alignment there. The leader should be clear on it. But if I work for somebody and they're not clear on what's expected, it's also on me to go to them to say, I need clarity around this so I can create the most value possible for the organization and work through that. And it's super important to get that right. And I hear a lot of times that, it's always the leader's fault when it doesn't work out. No, I think it's both. We're all adults and we want to create value. We're working together. So, let's take equal responsibility on both sides of this. And then the evaluation process during a performance snapshot, it's team-based, which a lot of folks would say, oh my gosh, we really can't do that. But every single time, and I've been through hundreds and hundreds of these, everybody really likes it, and it's so cool. So what I mean by team-based is performance snapshot, one team member's up, and the other team members, or at least a number of them that they work with, will be in the room, and we're looking at the most important number for the team or how the team creates value. Well, what are the things that you did really well to contribute to us achieving our most important number? And what are the opportunities to do even better in the future? Like, where could you create even more value in supporting that? And what I love about that is that when the manager's in the room with all the other team members, almost everything comes out. It's hard for one person to remember everything, but the team always remembers everything. And as they're bringing stuff up from the other side of the table, more things are popping up in your head around areas that they've knocked it out of the park and areas where, hey, if you just adjusted this a little bit, it could create a lot more value. And then when they get to their role, and these are your outcomes that you're responsible for in playing your part in this team to achieve our most important number, we dig into those and we get a lot of feedback there too. What did you do really well? Did you hit the number? Yes and no, or no? And are there opportunities to create even more value? So you get that feedback from the entire team. And then on the culture side, it really drives cultural alignment. What do we mean by all this stuff? If I'm living it, what are the measurable examples I have of creating more value, either material value, emotional energy value, or connectedness value in that spiritual category? And we get to capture all of it. So now imagine you've finished this process. You've gotten a lot of supportive and developmental feedback from the entire team. The entire team knows where your strengths and weaknesses are. And so whenever there's any sort of an issue or an opportunity, they will reach out to help spontaneously, usually. They know who to reach out to get help. So it just brings us a lot closer together. And we're all in this together as a team to create more value. So the performance snapshot process, it really works significantly better because of the team approach and the clarity around expectations. And from my experience, when you take this performance snapshot approach, it really transforms in an amazing way traditional performance reviews. A question I get asked a lot is, can you apply holistic value creation to families? And the answer is emphatically, absolutely yes. And when you think about legacy, what are we building over time? What do we want to leave behind, past generation to generation, et cetera? Most really just think about money when they look at that. And a lot of my friends that do have a fair amount of money really struggle with how do we, in our wills, leave it to our kids in a way that's going to have the biggest impact. And it's always just about the money. And the challenge with that is, let's say we divide it up and they inherit the money. Typically, it goes away pretty quickly. So there's a saying out there, and I've heard it a number of different ways, and it makes total sense. First generation earns it, second generation enjoys it, and the third generation destroys it. So if we're just going to divide it up and hope for the best, that's not the best strategy, in my view, to really build legacy. And when I think about building holistic legacy within families, I want to know, what are we building and passing generation to generation in the material value creation bucket, the emotional energy value creation bucket, and the spiritual value creation bucket. And one of the ways I think about the money side is, look, I've got a fair amount of money that I will be able to leave to my family, and I'm not going to divide it up. Whatever the gain is each year, I'm going to take 50% of that gain, and it'll get divided up amongst the family members depending on how they're participating in growing family legacy. So when you look at material, emotional, and spiritual, are you leading an effort to build that for the family? Are you participating in the efforts that others are leading, or are you not participating? So based on how you very simply score in those three categories, that determines how much of that material value you get from the gain someday when I'm not here, and there's a return on these investments or these assets coming in. So now it's not being divided up and hoping for the best. We're building on it, and we're encouraging family members to build on it. When it comes to the emotional energy, what does it feel like to be in the family? Who's leading the effort there to make that stronger and stronger, and even build on it to where when you pass it to the next generation, they build on it further going forward. Same thing on the spiritual side. At its core, spirituality, spiritual value creation is connectedness. Most go directly to religion, and that's awesome. But at its core, it's about connectedness. So it could be connected to God. But let's start all the way at the beginning. How connected are the kids to themselves within the family, and then to other family members and extended family and friends and communities communities that are important to them. So all of this can be built on, passed on to the next generation, and continue building on these things. So I think about holistic family legacy building, and it's full on through this holistic value creation lens, the way I'm looking at it. And within the family, so just, practically right now, how do you apply this stuff? If I think about material value creation for a family, hey, let's have a budget. And we have an amount of income that we can count on, and we have categories like, paying rent or mortgage payment, food, utilities. These have to get paid, and there'll be extras categories, right? So we want to go out to dinner maybe once or twice a week. On the weekends, maybe we want to go for ice cream, whatever it is, all these extras that are in there. Let's make a budget. We have this income. We've got all these categories. This is what we budgeted for each of those. And then assign one of the categories to a family member, or multiple categories to a family member. And as we finish the month, go back, keep track of it. What did we actually do? So we have a total budget at the bottom, and we have what we actually did. And I think from a material value creation standpoint, the very first line item should be save. If there's $5,000 for the family, we're going to save 20% or 10%. That's the amount that's there. And we make sure we do that because we want to build on this material value creation legacy with everything else. But they all own it. It's a game. We're working on it. What can we do to lower the budget in terms of what we're spending so we can save more or have more for a vacation? All of that. So there's so much that every family member can do to contribute to building material value within the family in a really healthy, fun way. The emotional side is interesting to me. I've said this a lot on my podcast. Positive emotional energy is the scarcest commodity on the planet. I would rather live only half as long if my emotional energy was on 9 or 10, as opposed to twice as long on 1 or 2. It would just not be a very fulfilling life. So emotional energy is something that within the family we can cultivate within ourselves and be really intentional, especially when we're not having the best day. Maybe we have lower emotional energy. Be really intentional about not affecting others and bringing their emotional energy down. So what are the activities we can do as a family to continually elevate emotional energy? And self-awareness is a big part of this. Do we realize how we affect everybody else? I think of the 3 areas of value creation: material, emotional, and spiritual. My strongest one is the emotional energy side. And I realized a long time ago, if I'm not in the best mood, it's wild. I can walk into a room and bring everybody down. And so if I'm not having a good day, one of my mantras is I'm going to do my best work, be my best when I'm at my worst. And my goal is nobody notices. And ideally they go, wow, that was an incredible interaction. So there's so much we can do there around elevating emotional energy within the family and making that a ritual. It's what we do, and passing that on generation to generation. And then the spiritual value creation within the family, it's going to be individual, unique for every family and however they want to approach it. Foundationally, what are we doing to connect with each other? What are the things that we're regularly doing to make that happen? It could be a dinner table discussion once a week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week, whatever that is. I know a lot of families are quite busy and they don't have the time for it. But what if we made that a ritual where minimum 3 days a week, we're going to have a dinner table discussion. We're sharing a meal. We're talking about family goals. We're talking about where everybody's at and the value that they're trying to create in the world. That does a lot to drive connectedness. And then there's so much more that goes with that. And each family gets to decide what that is. But this is really about being intentional with developing value as a family and developing it holistically in all the categories. And setting, for example, family goals. When you set family goals, I think, and I prefer to call them family value creation goals, could be a vacation we're going to, saving for college, moving into a new home. There's so many things that could go there. What's super helpful is if when you have the family value creation goals, that there's something meaningful for every single family member. All the kids, parents, guardians, whatever that is, there's something meaningful there. And it's nice to have sort of outlined at a high level what every family member's job is for the family. So for every child, maybe starting around 3 years old, you get to decide in your family when the appropriate age is, but they have a job. They don't get paid extra for it. This is your job for the family. And it could start out early as, hey, you brush your teeth and make your bed and put your toys away. But that job will increase as they get older until they launch into adulthood. And the reason we're doing that is basically to get them ready to be a self-reliant adult in a lot of ways. And if everybody can see each other's job for the family and visually, if you could just imagine the family value creation goals in the middle and around it, you've got the parents or guardians, you've got the kids, you can see what everybody's job is. So when you're talking about the goals, it's so cool to say and sort of visually look at it this way, that if everybody does their job, we have a much higher chance of actually achieving our family value creation goals. And I'm seeing this language change the value creation culture. I mean, the overall culture in so many families out there that are applying this. So really helpful. What is everybody's job for the family, and how does it relate to the goals, and how are we cultivating that over time? And with the kids, rather than going to school, let's say K-12 education, for example, in the United States, in the current system, it is something like this: get a good grade, get a diploma, get a degree, get a job. And in that system, all the kids are doing what they think they're supposed to do. When I say all, the vast majority, there are exceptions that are stepping out of that in a good way, but they're doing what they think they're supposed to do. with this framework and looking at it, you realize that, hey, the purpose of an education is to create value in the world. And we want kids to discover their value creation superpowers so they're doing what they were meant to do in the world. And once they get their, their heads and sort of mind intent around that, hey, I'm here to create value, and it could be material. Maybe I want to start a business someday, and I get a job at a fast food restaurant just to learn the ropes and how to earn some money. And then I work my way up. And so once I'm an adult, I'm kind of ready for the world as an adult. So there's so much there around once kids discover their value creation superpowers, it makes education so much more meaningful. They're not, again, doing what they think they're supposed to do. They're doing what they're actually meant to do. And one of the ways I like to look at it is working backwards. So kids at any age could be just getting home from the hospital after being born, 2 years old, 3 years old, 10, 16. It really doesn't matter what the age is. You can start this process at any age and working backwards, saying, hey, when our kids launch into adulthood at 18, what are the characteristics, traits, capabilities that we would like them to have? And now let's say, a child is 6 years old, 8 years old. What are the healthy struggles we can intentionally design for them to get them ready to have those traits and capabilities as they launch into adulthood? And when I talk about traits and capabilities, it could be on the trait side, they have a value creation mindset. Their intent is to be self-reliant. They live life with solid integrity going forward. They take personal responsibility. I mean, there's so many things that can go there, and it's up to each family to kind of work through that. And it's important to collaborate with the kids on it. And more so as they get closer to adulthood. And then on the capability side, hey, we wanted to be financially competent. What are the capabilities you want them to have? Being able to think critically, maybe. So there's a lot that goes there. But if you work backwards and then you start intentionally designing very healthy struggles for them to, struggle to get a capability to build confidence and use that to create value, you have a much higher chance with this holistic value creation model, having kids to a place where they're ready for adulthood. And for me, for example, came from a super low income family. I'm never felt like a victim. Everything's great. Started working really early. By the time I was kicked out of the house at the beginning of my senior year in high school, it was a non-event for me to be able to afford an apartment and finish high school on my own and go on and have an amazing life so far. It's just incredible. So working backwards, really important, and applying this holistic value creation lens, going for it. So what would it feel like if your kids were fully ready, in any family out there, when they launch into adulthood? They're self-reliant, financially competent. They practice virtue, i.e. they're creating real measurable value in the world. They're pushing back on things that take value out of the world. What would that feel like, right? And a lot of kids today really aren't that. Because I think with the best of intentions, as parents, we're taking some parents any and all struggle away from kids, thinking that would be really good. And it's actually harming them when we do that. They're not ready for adulthood going in. So can this be applied to families? 100%. One of the things I've done, because I want to push this out into the world any way that I can, I recently, earlier this year, became interim CEO of a company called Dinner Table. I'm not charging them $1 for what I'm doing. I am helping with and basically writing all of the thought leadership content around applying this to families. And if you're interested, you can go to dinnertable.com. Starting building these communities as of around April 1st this year, like intentionally going out and doing it. Starting from zero, we now are at over 10,000 parents and guardians in this community. And that's incredible what's going on. And my goal is a year from today to be well over 100,000. And then I want to get to millions. So imagine millions of families around the world applying holistic value creation to how they build their legacy and develop their kids. That will move the needle, and it will make for a way better world for me to age out in if we can make that happen. I wrote a book a few years ago titled Your Most Important Number. And as a result of hearing some of these things from CEOs, I've actually added an 8th chapter, which will be coming out any day now in a revision to the book. And the chapter is titled, Why Sometimes CEOs Fail. And the subtitle is, Does Your Team Really Understand? And what I mean by that subtitle is, do they really understand how your business was designed to create value for its customers and for itself? And for itself, in my view, it's continually increasing the value of the organization. And in most cases, they really don't. Like, a simple question to ask is, how do you create value for this organization? And just wait for the answer. What do they tell you? And usually there's a pretty big opportunity there. And the framework that I cover in the new chapter in the book is really 4 areas that I get into. 1 is the business model, 2 is strategy, 3 is the actual value of your product or service, and 4 is your culture. Now, on the business model, let's really simplify it. It's pricing, right? So how do you get that perfect price? It doesn't leave anything on the table, but doesn't overprice or you lose out on anything. It's that perfect price. And then what are all the expenses and approaches associated with it to, produce the product or service? And then how much profit is left over? And then the really exciting part, potential for future profits. When you really refine and get this right, you pick up additional market share, et cetera. Do all of your leaders understand that? Second is strategy. And strategy can sound pretty heady. A lot of folks, I think, don't want to look like they don't understand it. They don't want to look stupid, maybe. I don't really know. But when I simplify strategy, it's nothing more than approaches to increasing the value of the business. It's that simple. And every time I say that in a room full of leaders for an organization, they get it instantly. What could we do to increase the value of the business? And then those become strategic initiatives. And then third, the actual perceived value of your products, the real long-term value of products or services with the customers. Do your leaders know what that is? In most cases, I find that leaders like their stuff a lot more than their customers do. Obviously, they're in business, so their customers like it enough, but they like it more than their customers do, and they're not really connected to what that is, and it's really hard to improve around it if they're not connected. And then fourth, culture. So, a simple definition that I've used for a lot of years, culture is what we agree to do and how things get done. But it's really what drives the attitudes and behaviors that cause the most value to be created. That's it. It's really simple. And I think what we all want is to have a culture of creating value. So basically, let's create a value creation culture. So do all of your leaders understand those 4 things: the business model, strategy, the value of your products and services through the eyes of your customers, and the type of culture that will create the most value to happen? And so I think the reason a lot of these CEOs aren't going in the direction they want with their business is that their leaders don't understand it, and the CEOs aren't doing coaching around that on a continuous basis. And actually call it nudging, and it should be continuous. Every meeting that we go to, when something isn't fully aligned to improving the business model, strategy, the value of our products and services, and culture, I'm nudging right there. And over time, the more nudging that I do, and I would encourage you to do this as well, the more your leadership team is going to be fully in alignment with these things. So this is the ongoing coaching and the nudging, and you'll have to do less and less of it over time, which will free up a lot of your time to do other things that could create a lot more value for the business in terms of increasing its value. And it will stop a lot of frustration. How come I have to make these decisions? Why does this keep coming up? Well, the more your team is aligned to these 4 things, the better they're going to be able to make decisions to continually improve each of the 4. I mean, that's really the magic of it. So what I would say is do constant nudging until you have to do less and less of it, because you're just kind of amazed and surprised that people are making decisions like they're the CEO of their own role and they own the company. They really get how we're designed to create value. And then you've really arrived. They're actually nudging their direct reports to do the same all the way through. So this never stops. There's no end to how we can create value as an organization. And our job as a CEO, and by proxy, I would say the entire senior leadership team's job, is to continually and responsibly increase the value of the business. And in doing so, you go a lot faster when everybody is fully aligned, again, to your business model, to strategy, to the value of your products and services, and continually improving it as it relates to their job and driving a culture that causes the most value to be created. And it's pretty hard to fail when your senior leadership team and really all leaders in the organization are fully aligned to those four things. And as I think back to probably the largest of the 8 businesses that I've started from scratch so far, in aerospace, had about 500 employees, 64 leaders. And there was a lot of frustration in the early years. And as I started doing this nudging around these 4 categories, I went from 80 hours a week just holding everything together down to maybe 15 hours a week to hold it together. And I spent the rest of my time developing leaders and working with large customers to land bigger and bigger win-win, contracts with them. So I hope this helps. And again, I would start with that question I asked in the beginning of every leader that you have. How do you create value for this organization? And how do you know? When folks say that, hey, it can't be about the money, it's got to be about other things, literally 95% of the time when I get to kind of look under the covers at what they're doing, almost all of their decisions are about the money. And I feel like when they say the other things are most important, it comes off like virtue signaling to me. And there's so much business virtue signaling going on out there. And I think it's happening because if they say they're good and they're for good and they do good things, they believe more people will do business with them. But very few of them are actually fully doing those things. Now, there's some amazing leaders doing wonderful things in the world out there. And I don't want to take anything away from those. It just seems like there's a high percentage of business virtue signaling so others will do business with them. And when it comes to leadership, this is the positive emotional energy piece in the for-profit world that is so important. As I said, it's the X factor for leaders. It energizes everything. How are leaders passionately talking about what's possible and engaging everyone in these very productive, conversations and actions to march in that direction to create that value? That's what's so important about positive emotional energy and leadership. And then that just infuses out into the rest of the organization. Now, it can't be false positivity. You can't come in as a leader and stump speech your way into getting everybody energized. We create the environment from which everybody creates value. And a big part of that is how we show up as a leader. So the environment's really important. It just can't be showing up and having a good attitude every day. We have to have that good attitude, especially in bad times, but we have to get the environment right. And there's a lot that goes into that. And then the relationship piece of it, I think about this in the for-profit context. What are we doing, rituals and other things as a company to really encourage strengthening relationships between the team members? So important that you do that. And when you get this right across the board, and it's not just the team members within the company, it's going to be the suppliers, the customers, the communities that you engage with. So important to get that right. And the reason for that, one, it's the right thing to do, and it's just incredible. We are all on this journey of figuring out how to create value in the world, and we want to be there together, supporting, developing each other appropriately. Not like a lot of companies in the for-profit world, where it's just very transactional. You show up, I pay you, you do this thing. When we get it right across the board, everybody is so much more productively engaged. And in the companies that I've run, I've started 8 companies from scratch now. I've had some exits. The multiples in my exits were 2 to 3 times what everybody else on average was getting in the space. And I believe it's because we were creating holistic value across the board. People were so much more productively engaged. We got to this value as a company really quickly. And the story to go to the next level was very believable because it was absolutely true. And I always felt like it was ours to lose. And every time I sold a business, an equally, if not better option for me was keeping the business. And I would have been just as happy doing that. In most cases, I think I would have continued to grow it faster than the folks that actually acquired the businesses. So holistic value creation in the for-profit world, incredibly important to get that right. Now let's shift to the nonprofit world. So when I think about it there, it's impact, it's return on donor investment, it's leadership, and it's relationship. So On the material value creation side, there's a real correlation between the impact and the return on donor investment. Because the more impact we're having that our donors would like to see, the more revenue comes in. And it's really important to get that right so we can sustain the nonprofit and have the impact we want to have in the world. Unfortunately, so many nonprofits out there, and I've worked with many, they kind of devolve into, from this amazing idea and how they want to change the world in this one particular area to how can we raise money so we can make payroll? And they don't really have the impact. They're not measuring the things they should be measuring in a way that resonates with the donors that they're trying to, get the support from. So really important to think about that and get it right. We have to have the impact, and it has to be believable, meaningful if we want to attract the donors. So on the material side, just think about that. It's the return on donor investment, and it's the impact and how they fit together. And there's no end to how we can strengthen that. And as a nonprofit, we should be continually increasing the impact that we have in the world so we can grow it. Just like a for-profit business, when we grow, we're healthy. It's really important for so many reasons. And then leadership, it's really the same thing around the positive emotional energy that I described in the for-profit example. And the same thing when it comes to relationships. It's relationships with the communities that we impact, with the donors that we have, with our team members, suppliers, contractors, all of that. Let's make it one amazing value creation journey where we're there together, developing each other and just going off and creating more and more value over time. The part that I think has the most pent up, untapped value creation when you apply the holistic value creation model is within families. And when I look at families and I just kind of break it down simply, you've got financial stability, emotional well-being, and connectedness. So on the financial stability side, this is the material value creation within the family that can always be improved. It's so important to be financially stable and build on that over time so the family can sustain the lifestyle that they want and also survive emergencies. Things always come up. Being able to invest in their kids' education, whatever path that actually takes. So financial stability, really important. And when families intentionally focus on that, you can increase that year over year. I came from a super low income family and kicked out of the house beginning of my senior year in high school. My parents actually saddled me with debt they racked up in my name. So I started kind of negative when I launched into adulthood from a financial standpoint. And I've just focused on creating value with every step. And I call it this value creation cycle where I struggle to get a capability. It builds confidence, self-esteem, all of that. Don't stop there. I use that to create value, and I just keep rinsing and repeating. And it literally started at 6 years old, pulling weeds for 25 cents an hour. I just felt good. This was so cool. And I just kept building on it. So 8 companies later, and I've been able to build multi-generational wealth in just my time here. So it's not about that so much is what I'm saying here when it comes to families and financial stability. It's really about we can, if we're intentional about it, continually increase the strength of that financial stability. Not everybody has to be a multimillionaire. That's not required. I think that the financial piece is really just a tool to apply in the other 2 buckets when it comes to the family. So when it comes to emotional well-being, what does it feel like to be in the family? Same rules apply around positive emotional energy. Scarcest commodity on the planet, supercharges everything else that we do. So what does it feel like to be in the family? And do all the family members know how they impact that? When I look at working with, different families and especially the kids, I'm always interested in, hey, what are the value creation superpowers that each of the kids have? Is it on the material side? Do they have an interest in business? Is it on the emotional energy side? They love writing, playing music, performing, something along those lines. Could be speaking, leadership, all of that. What about the connectedness side? Do they like pulling, community events together, organizing family events and all of it? But the material value creation is a tool to support the value we create in the emotional energy side and the spiritual or connectedness side. those are by far the most important together, in my opinion. And I think the reason a lot of folks don't feel great a lot of times from an emotional well-being standpoint is that they're out of balance. They've made money more important. They size themselves up. They measure against others based on the financial piece of it. And they end up being very extrinsically motivated. We should all be intrinsically motivated if we want to feel better, and we focus on creating value and keeping it in balance in those three buckets: material, emotional energy, and spiritual. It really does feel a whole lot better. So this is so important for the families. And I don't just talk about this or think about it. I actually, every day it's front of mind as I'm going through my day. When I make decisions, I'm looking at making these decisions through a value creation lens. It really helps me with that. And at least once a week, I'm sort of deeply reflecting on it. And on top of that, I'm applying it in my businesses that I still operate today. I run personally 3 CEO mastermind groups. I call it Execute Mastermind. And all of the companies in those groups, I limit it to 8 CEOs in each group, are applying the holistic value creation behaviors in their businesses. I'm actually going to start a 4th group next year. And this is really important to me, to be practicing and not just talking about it. When we're on the front lines practicing this stuff, we can keep evolving and getting better and better. And when it comes to the families, I was asked by the board of directors of a company called Dinner Table back in May of this year, 2024, to become their interim CEO. And really kind of starting from scratch, we've been building communities of families raising kids to create value in the world. And I have my own community that I manage, and I develop and coach others that are managing their communities. And it's so cool to be on the front lines with these families, creating more and more intentional value as a family. So leaning and doing this work is incredibly important. And last thing I'll say around the family side of it, I think you can build family legacy from negative, from zero, from wherever you start, you can grow it. And I think about this also as holistic family legacy. So how are we growing the material side of the legacy for the family, more financial stability and certainty in that area? How are we growing the emotional energy value within the family? What does it feel like to be in the family? And what are we doing to grow the connectedness or the spiritual value creation with the family? So when I think about building family legacy, it's holistic family legacy. And I encourage all of the listeners here to think about that. As you make decisions, can you make decisions better through a holistic value creation lens? How's this impacting the material, emotional energy, and spiritual value that's being created? And keep that front of mind daily. It doesn't have to be a constant thought. And then at least once a week, if you can, kind of think about that more deeply. How am I applying the emotional energy, the material, the spiritual value, or connectedness value creation? And am I applying it in balance? And what would be the right balance for me as I go through that? So that's the question I'll leave you with. What is the right balance for you when it comes to holistic value creation?